Call in by clicking the link in the stream's description. The professor wants to hear from you.
Beginnings on the cusp, not too old to adjust. Old dog, new tricks. Remember, I was just a pup, something dirty in my cup. Clean soul, good car.
Isn't it lovely? I ain't looking back, I'm focused on what's in front of me. Everybody dates a number, but I'm still here luckily. I know that God got me, so I'm in good company. Isn't it lovely?
Welcome, and thank you for joining me. I am Professor Bear, and this is a Bear's Thought. And today, I am being sponsored by Tag Team Toys and Collectibles. You're a real old school wrestling fan like myself, you would collect things. Now, luckily enough, I worked at Toys R Us, so that means I got my hands on some of the stuff first before anybody else did. And recently, I was going through my garage cleaning up, and I found a box full of old wrestling figures, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I still have these. I'm like, how? Man, the way the world's going, I could use the money. As much as I love them, they're just sitting there collecting dust, not dirt, dust. So I reached out to, I was looking on Facebook and found this great collector's place that's in East Tennessee. So if you come in East Tennessee, you better make sure you go see them. They are great. They have some of the best wrestling figures. They have title belts. They have so much more. Plus, they have comic books. They have other types of toys. They are one of the great collectibles shops in the East Tennessee area. So make sure you are checking out, as I just popped up their logo, go check them out. And also, you just seen that QR code come up. You can scan it, and it'll take you to their Facebook page. And they also do mailing orders, so you have no excuse. Go check out Tag Team Toys and Collectibles, your number one for collectibles. Now, with that being said, I would like to introduce you to my guest this evening. Now, I'm a big indie person, and I just so happened to see one of her matches, and it immediately clicked to me. I got to have her as a guest. And luckily for me, she was gracious enough to come on my show. Today we have Slammin Sammy. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great, doing great. Like I told you before, just something about your spirit, it makes mine just jump up. You were just seeing such a bubbly person.
Oh, thank you. I really do very much appreciate that. It definitely, took some time for me, after, so long, to be, comfortable with myself. And, I've had to work on it too, primarily because I'm not, the most outgoing person in the world. So I very
Yeah,
much appreciate that.
I definitely understand that. So we're gonna start with every interview I have. I generally start with this question: how did you get into wrestling as a child? Or if you did as a child, how did you get into wrestling?
So how I got into wrestling and how my passion for it started out was whenever I was like 3 years old, and my dad was the one primarily who started watching it before me. And then when I was free, he introduced me to it, and we did. And on the couch, we mimic the wrestling moves like a choke slam on the on the couch, or just something, something very nice like that. And ever ever since then, I've been hooked on the pro wrestling business, and the pro wrestling world in general. And then when I was about 7 years old, I made the decision that I wanted to be a professional wrestler, and pursue this for the rest of my life.
It's amazing. So your parents didn't think like, oh well, this is just all kids just say they want to do certain things and she'll grow out of it.
Primarily, my dad was like, very happy because he was just like, yes, he's like absolutely, you can do that. Because little insider secret, actually, he wanted to do it too, like when he was like younger, but things happened in his life, and he just decided not to do that. I mean my mom always fought in a way that I would grow out of it, but I never did. And now they just both they both support me, and I'm generally grateful and appreciate to have loving, supporting parents, because not many people, especially in this business, have loving and supporting parents by their side, that will help them out, in their wrestling career, and support them.
Yeah, definitely. It is a blessing. So you at the big age of 7, you like this is it. That's what I'm going for. So how did you get into the business and when?
So I got I ended up I how I got into the business was at the age of 15 years old. I started training. I ended up going to a training center in Uniontown, PA, called the Stronghold Training Center, and I trained under a man named Brandon Kay. And it was a very it was very great for me. I mean, I had the privilege to be in there at 15 years old, because the law in PA is you have to be 18 to wrestle. But I'm just grateful for the fact that he let me in, regardless of my young age, especially from a training aspect. And I'm glad, in a way, that I started young, because it allowed me to get all the training that I need, that builds up to now, me being a pro wrestler, and living out my dream that I've always loved.
That's that's good. That's very good. So so you started at 15. When did you have your first match?
So I had my first match in April of 2024. I had it at Rise Wrestling, which is the promotion of where my training center promotes and has around. I had my debut against Laura Lovelace, and honestly, it was a very magical debut. I couldn't ask for anything better. I was already very excited, and I was just so happy today to finally start my dream of being, in the professional wrestling ring and doing what I love, being able to go in there, being able to go in there, and tell and tell a story and just, start, in the right direction of, of my wrestling career. And it truly, was a blessing and a fairy tale. I mean, my parents were very much proud whenever that happened. And, it was just, a whirlwind of emotions. It felt magical, and, and it felt surreal. And it was, for me, such a big moment, because, some people don't really, make it that far, after they start training. So for me, in a way, it was just very, very great. And I felt like, all the hard work that I did, paid off. And I'm still working hard. And in a way, I feel like, it's still paying off to get there. But yeah, it was the best debut ever.
So, what was your thoughts when you first walked out to the ring? What was going through your head at that time?
Jeez, well, the first thing that I really fought whenever I got out to the ring was like it was the burst through the curtain that just got me. I just ended up having so much adrenaline backstage. And in a way, I had some nerves, but by the time I got out there, they kind of calmed down in a way. And it was just very amazing. I I interacted with the crowd so much, just realizing how amazing that a show crowd can be, which sometimes is taken for granted in wrestling, how amazing that a crowd and an audience can be, while you're out there performing in that ring. And that was something that got me. And my thoughts were like, oh yeah, tonight I'm gonna walk away with a great debut, knowing that I gave it my all and my 100%, because that's all what we all want to do. Generally, when we go out there, we want to go out there, leave a great impression, and get the crowd invested, involved in storytelling and everything else. And we want to after it, be satisfied knowing we did everything that we could to make that match great, and to get the crowd involved, and everything and everything and everything went well, and that we're happy with ourselves and satisfied with the performance that we put on.
Yeah, definitely. With interacting to the crowd and hearing that, do you think that really made things a lot easier for you? Where you, like you said, you had your nerves in the back. Did it calm you down and let you be able to be free to do what you needed to do?
In many ways, like, first starting like interacting with the crowd, because at time I had with time I had to build up being like comfortable with my character, and being able to interact with the crowd, with that character in a way. I had great, I've had great fan interactions, but it definitely did take some time to be able to open up and be able to reveal that side of myself in many ways to the audience, because you have your different types of people. For some of them, it's not hard, they can just open up and be wild off the walls. But then you have your other type of crowd, where they're very like you don't hear much from them, and they're just like they're the quiet ones. So for me, it took some time, and not only in that aspect of interacting with the crowd and the fans, when I burst out of that corner at intermission, but especially, like with promos and stuff. That's, that type of thing takes, time to build and to be able to do that. So I feel like, my interactions with the fans nowadays are definitely better than when I was starting out. Not saying that I didn't have great fan interactions when I started out, but in a way I feel like I progressed and and got better at it as time moved on. So
All right. So, and hopefully anybody who starts out and they begin to learn, they get comfortable in their own skin and stuff. Um, if you were asked, what is the weakest thing of your entire package, and what the thing that you have to work on the most, what would it be?
I would say, and I mean, we were just talking about it, but I mean, basically for me, like the one thing that I still work on it. I mean, and I mean, I've gotten better, over the years, because now I've had some things that have helped me out with that personally. But I feel like promos and character work inside the ring, because that stuff, like I've said before, it's very hard to do, to be able to sell and be a character and tell a story at the same time through your promos and your matches both. That's something, as performers and entertainers, that we have to we have to develop. And at times, like I said before, it can take like a long period of time before somebody is comfortable and can like sell. But in like many ways, as time goes on later on, you learn, like we were talking about earlier, like, oh, this is supposed to be fun. The rest Pro wrestling is supposed to be fun and exciting for everybody, for watching it and stuff. So you remember that, and after so long of doing it, and you find you find what works for you, just throwing stuff at the wall until it comes back. So for me, I think personally, it's character work was one of those things that were something that I had to work on. I mean, I'm grateful now that in a way it's in a strong place, but I keep learning and growing to make it stronger every day.
Yeah, something my father told me, and that still sticks with me to this day, is when you think you know it all, you know nothing. Be open to learn, because you can always improve. There's no such thing as over improving. So,
Right, exactly. That's what I believe in a way. I feel like like even like whenever I was starting out, not just now, but I feel like in a way, like you still need to keep training, because there's some wrestlers out there that don't believe once they reach like a certain point to their career, like, they're like, oh, we're so advanced enough that we don't need to train. I'm under that impression, like you always need to train, every day. You always need to learn, you always need to keep learning and growing, every day in the business. And that comes, with going to training in the ring. And not only that, but training, outside the ring. I mean, for me, I feel like training is very important. It's very important to get those fundamentals, basics, and every day, and to keep learning new moves, keep progressing, keep being better, keep doing stuff with character work and practicing that, to to try and find something that can work for you. And and actually in many ways too, it can make you like, it'll make you a better wrestler at the end of the day, because that's what you work for. You work towards to be better every day, not only inside the ring, but also outside the ring, from a general basis. That's what it's all about. So I believe in still consistently training, regardless of what level you're at.
yeah. So, where did you? What was the first promotion that you started in?
So I started in a company under the name of Rise Wrestling, which is down here in Uniontown, PA. Very like not very nice company that's out there, is still doing shows. it's a very, good promotion run by someone, run by Brandon Kay, who was also, my trainer. Very, very good, very, great dude, very good wrestler, especially, in the ring and character wise. He's, just great. It was, it's a great, atmosphere to be around, and they still, do shows every month, and, they're still doing a good job.
Have you worked for any other companies so far?
Yeah, yes. I definitely have been working for other companies outside the area, and I've been to like, 7 states by now at this point. So, because I'm traveling, to all these other, all these other promotions and working because, I want to, make my dream into reality. I want to, be doing this for the, the rest of my life. And, there's been, many, many places I worked from Ohio, West Virginia, and I got even a couple more states coming up here. So I'm, very exciting, very excited, about all that. And I'm going to be booked out for these next couple months here, so I'm very excited for that. And I can't wait to see what happens. The future's big. Who knows what will happen. There's always light in the tunnel. So I really can't wait for that. But I strive to work everywhere and get out of this area, basically, so that way I can get my name out there and hopefully get recognized by the right people and my dream can come true.
Oh, uh, what is your dream? Tell me what is your main goal in wrestling?
My main goal and dream is to get signed by a professional company, whether it be WWE, AEW, TNA, or NWA, or OVW, something around those parts. I'm really am passionate about this, and I love it very much, and I would love to do it, for the rest of my life. I'd love to do it until I die. I very much would, just love to do it until I can't do it anymore. It's just something that brings me, so much happiness, something that I'm so, passionate about it. And if I had, to sacrifice an arm and a leg for it, I would certainly do that. I would certainly, sacrifice anything for it, because I've certainly have made sacrifices over, over the years, to make this happen. And I'm dedicated to even making more sacrifices, to, make this happen, all the sacrifices, and all the hard work I do. So, every day I just keep working hard to, get this dream and, be able to do it and so much more. So like, this is, something that I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to make it, my livelihood. And, I'm going to be so passionate. I'm going to continue to be passionate about it.
I mean that is the right attitude to have. Um, I think you definitely one thing that you said earlier that really stood out to me is you getting out of your area to go to different places because you're able to learn different styles and different crowd reactions and how to adjust your style because you may wrestle a certain way in PA, but then you're going to Texas and their style is totally different. So you have to learn how to adjust your ring style that fits for that crowd and also for you and makes sense for you.
Right, exactly. And there's so many types of, ring styles that are, that are out there nowadays. You got from, you got like the lucha style, and then you got, the very, acrobatic style, and then you got like, technical styles, and you got very much like powerhouse styles. You just, there's so many, different styles that you have. But in many ways in the wrestling business, pro wrestling can be so many, different things now. Like you can do, different things. It's not like, how it was back then, like, oh, you just have to stay, in this direction, have to just stay one way. No, pro wrestling can be, many different things, and you can do many different things, and you can like do very, unique things, with the storylines, with the character work, move wise. Pro wrestling, is changing every day. And I've said that, a lot of times. The culture, is changing, especially, with all the things out there, like social media, and, all this, type of stuff that you have out there for exposure, and, the ways that, the companies are doing things now and such.
True, very true. One thing that I always like to think, uh, I'm a big old school wrestling fan because that's what I was raised on. But even with that, I know how to appreciate the lucha libre style. I love the hard hitting styles, the hardcore. I love technical. So no matter what style you like and or love, that's great. But you have to be flexible and learning and moving because wrestling always is going to change. You have to, it may not be your cup of tea, but you have to be able to willing to give it a chance and to understand the business may be going a different way and learn how to appreciate it, which I think a lot of people are so set on their style being the best style, they don't even give another style a chance.
Right, too. You have people that are, set on their ways, and, of course, people are going to have their own preference of style. Lord knows I do. But, in some ways you do have to make, some, adjustments, professionally, to make, everything turn out, the way that it should turn out, and the way that, that you want it to, turn out. And like I said, pro wrestling is very unique. There's so many ways, that you can do it. And it's not just, one way where you're just, trapped in this like little box where you're told, only you can only do this, you can only do that, and you feel like you're suffocated. No, you can go outside the box and do something, very unique, and it can turn into, moments that can, last a lifetime. Moments, and, good stuff, for your character, and, your character's moments that can last a lifetime in a good way. So pro wrestling can be, many different things, and it can mean, many different things to the audience. And the audience, also wants to see, different and unique things out there every time, different characters, different wrestling, different styles of wrestling, and so much more. And, and like I said, yes, you sometimes do have to make those changes, and adjust, whether that be on the fly or something that, beforehand. But, you got to be able to do it, professionally, and, be able to maintain yourself, professionally, and personally too. At the end of the day, you have to be able to feel, better about yourself in the way that you were, able to do that. So, yeah, pro wrestling can be unique, and it can have many different meanings nowadays. So, you just have to adjust, and make it good for, for your style, or whatever, you're going to be up against in the ring.
Very true, very true. So, what is your style of wrestling?
So my style, for me, I am basically like a technical powerhouse. So like I do all like the technical movements, but I'm very much a powerhouse. So I like to basically like knock people over. I've always had in a way that I've always had that, aggressive streak in me, regardless, of my size and stuff. Cause, I'm like 5'4", and like 135 pounds, but I have in a way that aggressiveness that I think separates me, from a lot of people. I have that, aggression and intensity in a way that, has stick with me so much, throughout my whole life. I wanted to, put that into my, wrestling repertoire, if you will, and I wanted to make that, a part of me, because that's basically, like who I am. And I love being, intense and just having, those moves where, yes, I can knock somebody down because I can, if you just, if you just give me time, I can actually do it. I can, knock somebody over, and, pick them up and, slam them. That's, in the name Slammin Sammy, and, so much more. So, for me, that's my style, and that's the way of how I like to, do things. I'm a lot of times, aggressive and intense than others too, but I like to do that too. And I want to make things look like, they're believable too. Very much so with, this style. I want to make things to look like, they're real. Like I always lay it in. I lay it in, very hard in a way. And, and some people are like, what was that? I'm like, that's me. Like, that's just, who I am. I've always been, aggressive and intense, all my life. And I feel like, we need that style too, especially, for women in wrestling, because there's not too much of that style being done out there, and just, not only being able to do that, but adding, the technical aspects to it, where I can be good, technical wise, and show that I know a lot of stuff in wrestling that just, that you just, in a way adds a better feeling to, my repertoire of, stuff that I do. So, in a way, yes, I'm knocking somebody over and being intense, but also I have that, technical move set where I can pull stuff out and it can look good and it can be very, intense, along with how many, power moves I do and stuff. So, that's my style, and it's very good. And, it's not a style, for, everybody. Like I said, I feel like women, I feel like we need more women that can, do styles like that, saying that, yes, they can do styles like that, and they can be, aggressive and can be, superior to, the males out there and so forth.
Oh, how did you come up with your wrestling name?
So how I came up with my wrestling name is, it all started like a long time ago. I did martial arts for 7 years before I started my wrestling career. And the way I would fight, because like I explained before, in my style, I'm very like aggressive and intense, and I'm not afraid to knock somebody over, as I've mentioned before. And I remember just fighting like a machine, and like a and like an animal, and just being like, aggressive, and and using my hands mainly all the time, just using that. And then I remember it was my teacher in martial arts who actually gave me the name Slammin Sammy, because of the way I fought and the way that I was, fighting, and the style that I was, doing. And he said Slammin Sammy, and I just thought to myself, I'm like, oh, I'm like, that's it. That would definitely be, the perfect, wrestling name. So now I got him to thank for the rest of my life for, giving me the name Slammin Sammy, and I can, take off with that, because in many ways I feel like I've had and, made it into something, my own. It's just, and it's my own thing. It's my own thing, and it's unique, and that's just something very cool about it.
So, In 5 years, what do you picture yourself being? What is your 5 year goal?
Oh, geez, my 5 year goal is to, is to hopefully, like I said before, like be signed to a professional company. Because, like I said before, I want to do this for the rest of my life, until, I can't do it anymore. Because, I just generally love this business and I love being a part of it. And I love, the history so much and, so much more. So I'm hoping, to be signed to a professional company, whether it's, WWE, AEW, or, TNA, or, OVW, it doesn't matter, which is, as long as I can, get signed into, maintain that dream. And something else too is, just to keep having success in the wrestling business in general, just, keep, having success in the wrestling business, keep having those, great moments, keep having those, exciting moments, and, so much more. I just want to keep, succeeding in this business, and I want to keep, learning and growing, as we talked about, earlier, every day, to so that way I can, achieve my goals and achieve, this big dream I have, and also to, to keep, traveling everywhere, because, this the wrestling business is a big world, and there's so much, wrestling happening, and there's so many promotions, and I just would love to travel places and wrestle, to experience the different promotions, the different environments, the different crowds, and to experience, a different, atmosphere, and, and absorb all that great energy, that I can get from that place, from the crowd and from the fans every time, I burst through that curtain, and so much more.
That's amazing. Um, who who are your favorite wrestlers besides yourself, of course? And what what do you take from them that helps make a little bit of you?
So my favorite wrestler, my first ever like favorite wrestler of all time is Seth Rollins. Like, I have I have loved Seth Rollins since I was like, 7 years old, and it's been like now like a decade since I loved him, and I still do in a way. He's a big inspiration to me, in my career, especially for being a young female looking up to a guy wrestler. But for me, that's never mattered. He to me was always like, my standard in many ways of, what a pro wrestler should be like, and how he should carry himself, and in many ways. And, like the biggest thing that I think I would, take away from him personally is his self-esteem. Because, like, when I was, younger, I feel like in a way I didn't have that, so much. So in a way I kind of like, took that from him, and, just his outlandish, crazy personality too, which is, very high in self-esteem, of course. So I think if there's anything I took from him is like, his self-esteem, and like, his way of, how he looks at, himself personally as a wrestler, and, how he, did the things he did, to keep going, how he climbed up, the ladder, if you will, in many ways. So, and then I would say for another wrestler that I really, really like, not because she's, married to him, but, Becky Lynch, especially when she, first came around with the man and everything. Cause she, for me, cause my character is very much a, Rocky Balboa character. They try to doubt me, but I'm going to prove them wrong type of thing. So it felt nice to, finally see, a character like that. And it gives me hope, to know that there's, room for characters like that. And what that, and what that, put in me is, oh, it's okay, for you to be for you to be this character, and you can be, the same type of way, and you don't have to be, the same, wrestler as everybody else. You can be unique and different and be yourself.
Definitely. I think it you can tell when people legitimately put their heart and soul into a character. You connect. You're easier to connect with them, and you can just see the genuine hard work that they do to continue being that character. I think that's always a good thing.
Right. That's always, and that's what, in pro wrestling, that's one of the things that we want to do. We want to have that connection, with the fans, whether we're a baby face or a heel. We want to have that connection with the fans. We want to, give them, good storytelling in the ring that's so good that they're catched onto it. They're catched on to not only the storyline being told in the ring, but they're catched on to, to the characters, that are telling it, and they're connected to them, that, they're connected to them in everything that they, do. And they're, making that connection with them, in the crowd, and, at intermission, and, when they do these promos are like meet and greets in many ways. You have to do all these things in ways, to get that, connection with the fans, to get them on your side. And, sometimes you need to build that up, because it ain't always going to be, you get instant gratification. You're not going to get that, overnight. So it, in many ways, sometimes it takes that, momentum to build up, that baby face or heel, in the ring, and to build up the storyline in many ways. So in many ways, you have to take that, connection and build it up, piece by piece, like a set of, Legos every day.
That's definitely a good way of looking at that. So, the, this question, I think I know the answer, but I'm asking anyway. Do you work as a face or a heel?
I I work as a baby face, so for me personally, I like working babies, because for me it presents, more of a challenge, something in a way, to fight for. And I like challenges, in that way, for people to say, you can't be that ultimate, baby face or whatever. But then in the end, I can grab them by, I can grab them and be like, nope, prove you wrong. Nope, prove you wrong. I absolutely, can do it, because, that's what it's all about in a way, and getting the audience to, get a liking to you. And sometimes, that can be very, very hard for some, because, in Maze, there's some that can, just can play only one. And then there's others that can, that can do both in many ways. It's something that, in ways that you have, or, you don't. And, it's about, finding the character, in a way that's best for you, and that's, comfortable for you, and which side of the fence that you feel, that you're, better at. But personally for me, I felt like I wanted to be a baby face, because with my, character, I felt like in a way I had something to prove, because it's like this, Rocky Balboa character, like I said before, that just, gets doubted by everybody, but in the end shows why, why she ended up winning the fight, why she could, do it and succeed. So, that's my, side of the fence I play on. And it can, and it is a challenge. It always is a challenge, being a face, because you have to get, people to like you, and you have to, do the right things. But, that's what I like about it.
Uh, so, have you won any titles since you've been wrestling?
Yes, I have. I have recently won a title belt at a show called PCWA in Schuylkill Haven, PA, which has a lot of talent out there. Obviously, just a very great company. I actually defeated a man to get my title belt, so
Oh,
that's
wow.
something. Yeah, that's something I can say very very proudly. It's PCWA Bushholz auction championship, and my, it's such, a great honor. It's like, it's one of those, moments that you live for, in your career. You always, as they all say, you always remember your first. And for me, this is, my first title. So in a way, it was just, it was very special to me because, I've worked very hard for the years, and made so many like sacrifices, and I've been through it very much, both mentally and physically. So in a way, it was nice to have that great moment of winning that belt, and feeling good about myself, feeling like I worked my way and climbed the ladder to get up there, and it felt good to get that rocket ship, strapped to my back, because that's, in many ways, you are a priority, for that company. They're trusting you to carry that company on your back, in many ways, as a champion, which I feel like I've done, so far, a great job, because I've been defending that title, in many ways, not just at that place, where I won it, but I've, put my title up on the line sometimes, for defenses. So, and you feel like too, when you win a title, like, that's just, not the end. You work harder to prove that you can carry it, hold it, and so much more, not just from coming from me, but also, other professional wrestlers out there who've, held a title, can say, the same thing. You work hard every day to prove, that you deserve to carry that title, and that you belong on that show, and to be, one of the main pillars of the show. So, I mean, again, I feel like my hard work has gotten me so much to this moment too. And, you go through a lot of stuff in the business, because this business is not always sunshine and rainbows. It's just, it's really not. There's, bad time, there's times where, where you're feeling low and so much. But for me, that was just, great. And I felt like it gave me, in a ways too, like the confident boost I need to keep, moving in my career. It gave me the motivation to, keep training, keep working hard, to keep learning and growing, and to keep on improving every day.
That is great to hear. So I think my final question for you is going to be, how do you feel about wrestling males? Obviously, you're good enough to beat someone for a title, but do you feel like it can be done um, with a good balance, tasteful balance, or just how you feel about it?
I feel like intergender wrestling can be done in many ways, with, like, like what you said, like with the, perfect balance and stuff. And I feel like too, like with, the right, right ways, of storylines, and with, the right storytelling in many ways too, that it can be done. And then, us as, women and men can prove, that we can, coexist and work together and make, like a good, like, storyline. And, for just us, women personally, feeling like, we can, stand toe to toe with, with a man, and prove to be, just as dominant as we would be, with another female, in the ring. And I feel like in many ways, that in many ways should be, why I think, in a general basis, that intergender wrestling should be, given a chance in many ways. Because there's a lot of things that, you can do with that, from a storyline basis, from like a character basis, and, so much more. So, and, to prove that, we can be dominant, and prove, in ways, that we can, work together, regardless of gender, and, so much more. And I think in many ways, like, it pushes our characters up a notch, in a way to get us, to work harder, and discover like this deeper area in ourselves, where we can just, let that out. I mean, I mean, I certainly do love, wrestling the men. And, in many ways, you can be more prone to be aggressive towards them. And, in many ways, some of them can, get it out of you, which is exactly, what I love. I tell people, like, you give me the same intensity that I give you back. Like, you know what I mean? And that's something that I'm very much, all about. So in many ways, I think intergenerational should be something that we should, normalize going forward. And some people, are scared to do that, which in a way, that's understandable. But, if like, in a way, like if you're so, comfortable, if you get to the point, where you're in your comfort zone, or even, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, to just say, just do it, just go for it. Because, when are you going to get, opportunities like that, again? And I've personally had some intergender, matches that I've loved. I mean, I remember doing an intergender tag team match where me and my colleague, Autumn Breeze, we had to team up against these two guys. And then I remember, winning a 21 man rumble. And that was something to behold. And, and also winning my first title off of a male too, which was very, very much awesome. So in many ways, I think, intergender wrestling should still be something that's, out there and available, and should be, given a chance.
Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time out to do this interview with me. I'm very happy. Um, I hope that you continue your success and continue growing. And I want you to know you have an open invitation. Anytime you want to come back, we can definitely make that happen and have another great conversation.
Right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Guys, girls, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I I hope that you will now follow and keep up with Slammin Sammy. If not, I'm gonna come find you, and me and you're gonna have a long talk in the principal's office. I'm just saying. But again, guys, girls, thank you so much. Um, Love that you support me. Um, Found out today that I have people in the UK that are watching, so thank you very much. It's a mind blowing thing for me. You got to excuse me. I don't know why my voice feels like it want to go out, but it is. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And make sure you follow us. Oh, did not shoot out your social media for anyone who wants to get in contact with you.
Okay, so my social media, first I'll do my Facebook. My Facebook is Slammin Sammy, very simple. And my Instagram is, at Slammin Sammy official. That's also, very simple. And my Twitter is at Slammin Sammy. It's a little bit down, but I'm gonna get it working here. And my TikTok is at Slammin Sammy 101.
Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for blessing us. And guys, girls, if you did not follow Sam and Sonny, what is wrong with y'all? You're disappointing the bear. You don't want to make Professor disappointed. So, again, thank y'all for watching. I am Professor Bear. This has been a Bear's Talk, and we will see you around the campfire again.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.